We're talking about personality disorders and the three categories, and that they sometimes overlap a little, but that you need to know the unique qualities of each of those 10 personality disorders. Do people with personality disorders think that their personality is a problem?
No.
Do some people with personality disorders may need to just never need any mental health assistance? They may be fine, right? But then some of them will find their way into the healthcare system for various reasons. What's one that comes to mind that you might end up in a mental health unit taking care of? What type of personality? Antisocial. What's another one you may see?
Schizoid.
Huh?
Or schizoid.
Schizoid you might. Another. Maybe, but the one big one that you may see in there? Borderline. Borderline. And remember, borderline, the name throws you off. Because you'll say to people, oh, they're borderline personality disorder, and they're like, no, they're all the way. And it's like, no, borderline's the name. And that's because it used to be considered borderline between like a maybe schizophrenic, you know, so the name was borderline. Just remember, it doesn't mean they're on the borderline of having an issue or not. They do, and the name is borderline. So, and with the real histrionic, emotional, constantly seeking attention types, like dependent and borderline, what type of things are they at risk for happening to them? Putting themselves
Being taken advantage of.
Being taken advantage of, being hurt. So you have to, as a nurse, safety for those people. We talked about borderline clients having the defense mechanism of splitting, and that is real concrete thinking, all or nothing, and they do that with the staff. And it's not that, you know, people will hear it and go splitting, they're doing splitting with the staff. It's not that they're necessarily trying to split us up, it's just their splitting behavior is impacting the staff. Splitting behavior is everything's either all good or all bad, right? So if they decide that one nurse or one tech has done something to them, then their splitting tendencies will be that they start to talk about that tech. They start to try to stir up problems between the staff and try to do things that cause problems for this tech that they've decided is all of a sudden in the bad category. So some of the things you have to make sure you do is if they come to you and report that somebody's maybe abused them, then you have to investigate it. You have to listen to their report. Because they are at risk for that happening. They could have very well put themselves into a situation, not that it's their fault, but it could have happened. So you investigate it now. You don't just blow it off. But you also have to make sure you're maintaining those boundaries with the client and that they're following the guidelines of the department. So, a little bit there about personality disorders. The paranoid personality type, are they going to be very trusting of you as a nurse? No. They think that people are trying to trick them, deceive them. So as a nurse, we talked about the other day that you need to make sure you keep a calm, neutral demeanor with them, very factual. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. This is not the client that you just try to make a joke with, maybe. Then, you know, you're just very neutral. Let's see. Go back over your meds. We already talked about most of the meds with the personality types. some of the personality types, like antisocial, that just said there's really no medication to treat it. Some of the personality types may need an antidepressant, so go back over your signs and symptoms of your antidepressants. Sometimes they may benefit from a mood stabilizer, so go back over your mood stabilizer. Occasionally an antipsychotic. The narcissist, we talked about it. We said on the slide it said it was more women than men, but it was more men than women. Did they care about your feelings?
Nope.
No. So they're the one we talked about in the milieu therapy that you may have to watch, that they're not hurtful to other clients. They don't care. So, in managing the milieu. Now, we said that maybe they had a deep-seated problem with self-esteem. We said, you remember, we talked with all these personality types, we talked about the theory of maybe why they're this way. Remember, it's just theory. And on there, it mentioned that this super self-esteem that they have and all may be compensating for low self-esteem problems. But did they think they have low self-esteem? Is that a conscious thing with them? No. They think they're better than everybody else. They're smarter than everybody else. Everyone's inferior to them. And so you're not going to be able, as a nurse, to teach them how to appreciate somebody else as a person. You might can role model those skills and show them how to treat people. So what you are going to have to do is maintain the boundaries and limit setting. It is not okay to talk to other people of this group like this. You're not going to go, why did you say that? Well, you're not feeling that way about them.
Then they push you over. Yeah, if you're pushing over.
They're going to be all right. So the narcissist, a big one that comes up a lot. And said some of that one group is histrionic, real emotional, and borderlines are in that group. Borderlines at risk for suicide and self-harm. Yeah, remember we talked about them cutting and all. So they may have, and actually I talked about that when that was my patient. You know, I said I got mad at my husband and just kind of acted like I was going to commit, just cut my wrist. And he called 911. You can't blow them off as a risk for suicide, even though they may have some histrionic, which is over-the-top behavior, and they may have made some failed attempts and all. They're still at a high risk for suicide. They're very depressed. And what is it with the borderline that you're so concerned about with them hurting themselves, maybe a suicide they might not have even meant to do, or a car wreck or something? Impulsive. They're impulsive.
So they kind of have a couple of them mixed in together.
Yeah. So, just a lot of it goes back to assessment. I don't have to figure out if you're just acting out and making something up. If I have to assess and stay on top of what I see you doing. I can't just say, oh, that's, Miss Lyons, she's in here for the 6th time this month. We did have a client one time that was schizophrenic. And this was 30 years ago, so, in another state, so not anything that I think you guys. And she would come in frequently. I might have told y'all about her. And then she came in one day, and I clocked in, and I could hear somebody screaming and yelling. I mean, cussing the unit like you have never heard. Just every bad word. And the nurses were like. And I was like, is that Miss So-and-so? And they're like, yes, she just got here. And she usually wasn't that way. And they're like, we're just trying to get her back to, we're trying to get her into, mental hospital or she was in a day program or something, and it's like a Sunday, of course, so they were trying to figure out where she needed to go. And they hadn't put her on the monitor yet. She was in OD. And so we went back to put her on the monitor, and it was out of character. She was cussing us for everything we were with. I mean, bad. But it wasn't, you know, I'm having problems, I'm hurting or anything. It was just really upset. And so we went in to put her on the monitor, and she just kind of got up on her knees in the bed. And I remember she had her hands here, and she said, "I'm bleeding." And there was blood everywhere. And she had erupted. And by the time we got her on the monitor, I mean, so it was a stat section. You know, and everybody was like, oh, you know. And it's like, so assess first. Assess your patient first. She just erupted. It was about her 12th. But she was okay. And she did end up getting a court committed. Some of us went to court with her to try to get her some help. And truly needed it. So, with the rest of my notes. PowerPoint from yesterday. So we talk about the borderlines, narcissists, antisocials. You don't want to get into a power struggle with them. And you kind of can't start bargaining with them either. Well, if you do this, I'll let you go outside, because then it's just an endless thing. Well, last week you let me go out and have a smoke break. So again, just managing your boundaries, being very, I said you need to be comfortable in the way that you're caring for them so they can't intimidate you. Don't forget your therapeutic communication that we went over in Unit 1. No why questions, no yes and no questions. If they're anxious, concerned about suicide, or they sound really, really down in the dumps to you, remember what we said in Unit 1. Don't give them false hope. Oh, it's going to be fine. You'll be fine. You know, avoid the false hope and all. And make sure you're using your therapeutic communication. Ask them to tell you more. Repeat back what they said. So you say you just don't feel like going on anymore. Tell me how that makes you feel. Go back and look over your therapeutic communication. Talked about the difference between passive communication, aggressive, and passive aggressive, the Mexican restaurant. Yeah. So you want to teach assertive skills to all these personality traits. Some of them won't listen, but that more the dependent people, dependent personality that's just passive, they need to learn how to say what they need. Tell me what you need. Don't beat around the bush and say something else. Tell me what you're needing. So before we wrap up, just to sum them up, they do not realize they have a problem. Because like the obsessive compulsive that's in there, obsessive compulsive personality type we talked about, is different than the OCD you have with anxiety, where people realize they have a problem, they're seeking treatment. This OCD personality type doesn't really think they have a problem. But people, all 10 of these may end up in treatment for various reasons. Just make sure as you're studying them that you know what meds they might be taking. You know, those antidepressants, mood stabilizers. Understand your communication skills. That's one of the key things with these, is the nurse's communication skills. All these things we've talked about. Maintaining your boundaries. If they can't maintain the boundaries of the unit and the limit setting, they need to go back, they need to be separated from the group. If you can't make them change, you're at least teaching them how to behave in society, role modeling some productive behavior. So the rest of Unit 3, we've still got tomorrow too, so we will finish all of Unit 3 up today and tomorrow. We've got our day today. We're going to talk about psychotic disorders. I know y'all probably didn't read ahead on Unit 3. We just had an exam today, but tonight I want to make sure you read over your notes and we can go back over some of this information today. I always take lecturing after an exam. I'm sorry. So schizophrenia, we're going to talk about it first. The major concepts of schizophrenia. It has phases. Generally, if you ever hear somebody say they had a psychotic break and they ended up in the hospital, that's what you generally see with schizophrenia. Something, they may have what they call a prodromal phase, which if you ask the family and all, you may have seen some things going on. We talked about this earlier. But then they have that acute phase that generally requires hospitalization, and then the treatment, and then you try to maintain them. The medications that we focus on the most with this are those antipsychotics, first generation and second generation. You need to recognize those meds, recognize a few of those first gen, a few of the second gen. We've had some of them already on test. The first generation, I'll just use haloperidol as the example, Haldol. Those were the ones we talked about when we had the API book out in Unit 1 that have the real kind of devastating side effects, the neurologic side effects. They're dealing with your neurotransmitters dopamine. Okay, so we're back to neurotransmitters. And I'm just doing kind of conceptually here. We can get more in the details when I pull up the PowerPoint. But those symptoms, some of the symptoms, if you get them, they never go away. So, you ended up with patients, you could literally look at somebody on the street and tell that they had been on Haldol or something for years because of the movements that they made, the mouth movements, the writhing type movements. Those meds give you these neurological motor dysfunction. And, so then the second generation came out, and kind of the prototype for it was clozapine, and they deal with not just the dopamine but also the serotonin. So serotonin's back up again, and they tended not to have those bad side effects. If they were managed correctly, you could usually avoid them. So medications are real important with schizophrenia. But you will also, there may be other meds that you need in there. So we go back to the drugs that you've already been studying all last week and this week, your mood stabilizers, some antidepressants. So, overarching view of that, a lot of the homeless people you see, unfortunately, are schizophrenic. When we talked about in Unit 1 how we used to have large mental hospitals each state had a lot, and we were talking about how they're kind of closing. Them, not kind of closing, they are closing. A lot of the people that really struggle to manage in society would be clients with schizophrenia. But with like day homes and partial day homes and things like that, there are options. Pull this up. We'll start on the calendar.
The white one or the brown one?
The white one?
It's like schizophrenia and schizophrenia 2.
Let me, hang on, let me look at it. I'm doing the plain schizophrenia one, the first one. I'm gonna have to find one.
Miss Gary came in here and got it earlier.
Did she? All right. I'm gonna walk over across the hall and get it because I want to play a video. Okay, so y'all just take a minute. Loading that. Do you want me to grab it?
Cognition and neuro. Oh, no. You can't have her teach us neurological stuff. Before we get started, we're just going to watch a couple.
There's going to be a hearing tomorrow to see whether or not there's any legal basis why you have to stay here.
I'm not crazy.
If it was up to you, would you like to leave the hospital tomorrow?
I'd like to leave the hospital tomorrow because I've got things I got to do.
Okay, well, I'm
It's the first
going
of the
to
month,
be...
and there's a lot of rent to be paid
Right.
and all that.
Okay, what brought you into the hospital?
I turned myself in on 5150 because I felt like killing myself.
Okay, so you came here voluntarily.
So I could stop from killing myself.
And what was going on that you felt like killing
It was
yourself?
3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. All the same thoughts kept racing through my mind over and over and over again. I just wanted them to stop. Period. And I thought, well, if I kill myself, I'll stop thinking. And I thought, well, that isn't too good of an idea either because you've got friends and people around you that love you. So I stopped that thought. And I said, well, who am I going to call? I called up Ghostbusters. I mean, no, that came out wrong. It's a joke. And I had called Ghostbusters. I called a crisis intervention center and talked to them on the phone. They said there was nothing they could do for me for one night. So I wound up here by ambulance. Get an ambulance to take me.
Okay.
Because the crisis intervention couldn't do anything for me.
Have you ever made any suicide attempts?
Oh yeah, I have. A couple of them when I was 19.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.